Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15 of the Renovation and Outdoor Living Show. It is May the 26th. Hello, and welcome to Tuesday here at the Renovation Show. Now, a quick recap of Friday's show from last week when we were looking at a feature of the outdoor and indoor cooking areas, and we started off by talking to Tyler Rodden from Brustics, who introduced us to the mouth-watering world of the wood-fired oven. Now, the highlight here was, for me, look, I've seen plenty built in the back of people's gardens before, but I didn't realize that you can actually buy large portable wood-fired ovens rather than having to commit to a massive building project that can't be moved once it's finished. So that was the highlight for me. And then we moved indoors and we spoke to Refresh business owner Dave Giorgetti, who introduced us to really simple but very effective concept of adding some texture to your splashback. It doesn't sound like much, but from the images we saw, the effect, and then you add some lighting, which then sort of accentuates or features the texture, and the effect was stunning. Well worth having a look back if you didn't see that and you're interested in how to, I don't know, make your kitchen or even your bathroom pop a wee bit. We announced our competition. The prize, a $250 Mitre 10 voucher, which you can still enter this competition. All you have to do is like this page and then tell us what your next renovation project is likely to be. You can use the live comments section here to be able to do that. And you're able to talk, in fact, you can enter till June the 2nd, but you're able to talk to us any time you want. If you want to talk to one of our experts during the show, then please jump online and flick us a comment, and we'll see if we can get the questions to our two guests. So to today's theme, costings and requirements, both really key. In fact, it's not just important, they are absolutely key. So we're going to start off with some requirements. What are the healthy home standards and cost estimates for residential renovations and new builds? Morgan and Stone have just said hello. Hi to you. Nice to see you. Thanks very much for dropping us a comment to say hello. Because like in July last year, the government passed new legislation which formalized the healthy home standards. Improvements were made, well, they were designed to make our many hundreds of thousands of rental homes across the country warmer, drier, and healthier to live in. All makes good sense. But what are the requirements? What do you need to know? Where are the deadlines? What are the penalties if you don't meet the deadlines? And who can help you stay, well, the right side of the new laws? This isn't an option. If you're into the rental business, this is serious stuff. So to help us through this, we've got Dan Vincent joining us. Now, Dan is the managing director of Encore. Before Encore, he spent 12 years in financial services around the globe. He then spent 20 years in the small business space, creating, building, developing, selling small businesses. And he now has built up and runs Encore. He's described as charming, handsome, funny, and he wrote his own bio. And I imagine he probably used an airbrush on the picture as well. Dan, good to see you this morning. Thanks all this afternoon. Thanks for giving us some time here. So very quickly, tell us, I mentioned Encore and the connection to why you'd be talking to us about what we need to know about meeting the new standards of legislation.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for that very kind introduction. Can I just say, before we dive into the fascinating world of healthy homes, how well you're looking? I mean, clearly 2 months of lockdown's been very kind to you. Your skin's glowing, that hair looks healthy and thick, your eyes are sparkling. Well done, mate.
Oh, I'm all a blush. I don't know what to say. Let's talk about the renovation space. Hey, Dan, so seriously, tell us what Encore does.
So we specialise in repairs, maintenance, and we do a lot of insurance claim work with property managers, real estate agents, body corporates, that kind of thing. So all the sort of stuff that we're about to talk about that fall under the healthy home standards is exactly what we do day in, day out.
And I imagine it's become a massive part of what you're doing, given the requirements. So tell us about the standards. What exactly are they requiring?
Yeah, so in July last year, 2019, the government passed some new legislation which formalises these things called the Healthy Home Standards. And essentially they're a range of improvements and enhancements designed to make the 600,000 rental properties in New Zealand warmer, drier and healthier to live in. That's obviously really important in a country like ours. It's no secret that a lot of our houses aren't particularly well built. A lot of them aren't designed particularly well for our climate and environment. And given what we've all been going through over the last 2 or 3 months, it's those damp, cold living conditions that can make something like coronavirus, even more devastating for people who are at risk of living in them. And I think the last census showed that about a quarter of the houses built in New Zealand are damp and mouldy. And I think you can safely say that that's probably a lot higher for rental properties.
people are going to invest less, aren't they, if they're not actually living in their own properties, because it's all money in the end, isn't it? Now, some of these requirements, I know things like the floor and ceiling insulation, that's already been ticked off. In fact, if you haven't got that in, you're effectively breaking the law. But there are other deadlines which are now being met, which now have to be met, rather.
Yeah. So there's several deadlines. I'm going to simplify everything down. The healthy home standards are actually quite detailed, and there's a number of exceptions and variations. So if anyone's really keen to get into the nitty gritty of them, a really good website to go to is tenancy.gov.nz. But to fit all of this into 6 to 8 gripping soundbite minutes, I'm going to have to really simplify things down to their essence. So in terms of deadlines, I guess there are two main ones coming up. The first one is in the 1st of July this year, so just over a month away. And from that date, any rental property owner who's varying or renewing a tenancy agreement needs to be able to provide a really clear list of everything in the property that's compliant and non-compliant with the healthy home standards. So just to be clear, they don't need to have done the work, but they need to be able to provide a list of everything that meets the standards and that doesn't. And I guess the second main deadline coming up is on the 1st of July next year, so 2021. And from that date, most landlords are going to need to be able to get their homes compliant, everything that we're about to talk about, within 90 days of renewing or signing a new tenancy agreement. So that's from the 1st of July next year.
And this, of course, means if you're going to wait till June next year, you're going to miss the boat, and you're going to be potentially, and we'll get to the penalties, because this is really important, isn't it? I mean, you've got to be onto this now, really. So let's, before we go through the key things, talk me through the penalties. If you're not ready by July 2021 and you haven't got everything in place, what can happen?
Yeah, the penalties are stiff. And so we're advising all of our customers not to wait until next year or until after July next year when they renew their tenancy. There are 600,000 rental properties. There are nowhere near enough contractors in New Zealand to make them all compliant if everybody does that. So we're strongly encouraging all our customers to jump on this now and get it done. In terms of penalties, if a landlord's non-compliant by the deadline, their tenants can actually report them to the tenancy tribunal. And in the tenancy tribunal, if they find anything not up to standard under these healthy homes standards, can then issue them with a work or a monetary order. And the monetary order can actually be a penalty of up to $4,000, which can be paid to the tenant. So it doesn't take a crystal ball to see that a lot of tenants are going to take the opportunity to report their landlords to the tenancy tribunal, A, to get the stuff done quickly, that may not be compliant, but B, because there's a financial carrot that gets paid to the tenant if the tenancy tribunal sides with them.
And we've seen it's already effective. We've seen it already with the, I mentioned the insulation, which should already be in, and we have seen a couple of tenants succeed through the tenancy tribunal and get those financial rewards or awards awarded to them. So let's look at, I don't know, break this down to 5 categories. The 5 main categories that we need to know about that we need to address by July 2021.
Yep. So 5 main categories, and again, I'm simplifying. Heating. So essentially, the largest living room in a rental property, if there's more than one living room, it's the largest one, needs to have a approved fixed wall heater capable of heating the room to 18 degrees Celsius all year round. For most rental properties, that's going to be a heat pump or a wood burner or a flued gas heater. Open fires, unflued heaters, portable heaters, electric heaters are non-compliant. It needs to be one of those 3 types of devices for almost everybody. But more than that, there's quite a complicated calculation that needs to be done to work out what kilowatt rating the heater needs to have for the property. Looks at the volume of the room that it's in, the age of the property, the sort of insulation it has, how many internal, external walls, how much glass there is. And then it crunches all that data and comes up with a kilowatt rating for the heat pump. So even if you already have a heat pump, it may not be big enough to be compliant. So it's a really tricky one. I would say well over half of every property we've been into so far is not compliant with the heating section. The second one is insulation. So you're right, you mentioned this before. Most properties should be compliant now with the insulation requirements. Although under these latest healthy home standards, there have been some small increases to the ceiling and underfloor heating. So it's important that landlords and property owners get their heads around what those slight increases are. Yep. The third category is ventilation. And there are 2 things that come under ventilation. The first one is that any living room, dining room, kitchen or bedroom must have an openable window, door or skylight that opens to the outside and can remain in a fixed open position. And the area of that needs to be at least 5% of the floor area of the room that it's in. The second thing is, and this is a biggie, every kitchen and every bathroom needs to have an extractor fan so a mechanical extractor fan that can vent to the outside of the house. And a huge number of properties would go into don't have that. So that's a biggie. If it goes into the ceiling or has some sort of self-contained unit, non-compliant. It needs to vent to the outside of the property.
Wow.
Fourth category is draft stopping. So basically, the property can't have any unreasonable gaps or holes in the walls, ceiling, windows, skylight, floors, or doors that cause a noticeable draft. So noticeable is quite a subjective term, but essentially, if you can feel cold air coming in, if you can see daylight through it, if you hold up a sheet of paper and it's windy and it moves, or if you can fit the edge of a $2 coin in it, then it's non-compliant. And that's a huge issue for older properties, villas and bungalows, which are full of those kind of holes. And the second part of that is that if the property has an unused fireplace, it needs to be closed off or the chimney needs to be blocked to prevent drafts. And the final category is moisture ingress and drainage. So moisture ingress essentially refers to any property that's got an enclosed subfloor or a basement. And those properties need to have what's called a ground moisture barrier, which is just a fancy word for a sheet of polythene that stops the damp from rising up from the dirt and coming up through the the floorboards or the floor in the house. And the second part of that is drainage. So all properties need to have drainage that can effectively remove any stormwater, surface water, or groundwater. So that's things like guttering, spouting, downpipes, and drainage. They all need to be in good working order, no holes, not blocked, able to easily drain away all that water from the property.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's all logical. A lot of it sounds very expensive. It's going to cost a lot of landlords a lot of money, but it all makes sense. Now, here's the encore bit, isn't it? Because either you can try and do it yourself, or you can ring you and say, look, I've got 3 rental properties. I haven't got time to go and see whether it's compliant. What can you do?
Yeah, so there's lots of options. I think by far the best is to contact a company like us, or ideally us, because what we'll do is we'll go in to the property. And
sorry, nicely timed website banner just came up there. Sorry, carry on.
Good work. We'll go in. We'll do a full inspection of the property, top to bottom, inside and out, and we'll provide a really detailed report which clearly shows to the property manager or the property owner exactly what's compliant and what's non-compliant. And then at the same time, we can give them free quotes for everything to bring it up to standard. And then we can sign it off at the end. So that's a big time saver. If you've got a number of things that need bringing up to standard in the property, you could be dealing with 4 or 5 different companies, getting multiple quotes. It's very time consuming. So a company like Encore is a great option if you want to get it done easily, as a one-stop shop.
And then, of course, you can then probably do some of the work as well if need be, or at least organise it. Very cool. Hey, Dan, thank you very much. Or the other thing you could do is you could just ask Dan some questions right now and get free advice. So, because there's what's the fee which you charge for going into a property and just doing the check?
We're running an introductory offer at the moment, so $99 for the inspection and the report, which will refund if the property owner uses us to do the work in the property. T's and C's apply. I think the average is between $200 and $300, so that's a really good deal.
Yeah, it's not much, eh? So there you go, $99, or just ask Dan some questions now and get free advice. Post some pictures of your house and hold up a piece of paper in front of your drafts and see if he can approve it on the spot. Dan, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and I've got to say that your skin is also glowing. And I know how much you will have loved spending the last 6 weeks with your family. So anyway, we'll talk to you again. It'd be really interesting to follow up or keep in touch as the progress goes towards these deadlines as well, to see how many people are complying. I mean, it's always a major issue in the media. So we'll talk to you again, no doubt about that. And that is Dan Vincent from Encore. Now, I did also mention just before I spoke to Dan about our competition, because if you're going to need to start getting a rental property up to compliance, you might need a bit of cash to spend a mite at 10. So you've got a $250 voucher coming your way. If you can like this page and then tell us what your next renovation project is going to be. Oh, by the way, on the subject of, Dan mentioned the heat pumps and the kilowattage, whether they're the right size. If you get a heat pump company in, they'll tell you. They'll work it out for you. They'll go in and they'll be able to tell you on the spot whether your heat pump complies or whether you have to install one of theirs. So, sticking with the costings theme, our next guest is Nick Clements. Now, Nick is the founder and CEO of Your QS. And the clue in what we're about to talk about is in the title. QS, of course, standing for Quantity Surveyor, the people who manage the costs of construction projects. And your QS specializes in residential construction, mainly in the renovation space, working with builders, designers and homeowners throughout New Zealand, also does some new builds as well. And Nick joins us now. Nick, first of all, just explain what it is that a quantity surveyor does, and also what your point of difference is.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Yeah, so as you sort of outlined, quantity surveyors are all about cost and managing costs on builds. So one of the sort of areas that we get involved in a lot and we specialise in is working out what the cost of a building project is going to be. The best way to work out the cost of a building project is to build it and keep a record of what it costs, and then add it up at the end, and you know what it cost. That'll give you the most accurate answer as to what a building's going to cost. The problem with that is if you're trying to make decisions about whether you should be doing it or how much you should be doing it, it's a little bit late. So where quantity surveyors come in is we can work with drawings and design information early on in the process. We've got a good understanding of the different aspects of building, the different trades that are involved, and we're able to build a realistic estimate of what the cost's going to be way before you start it. So the idea is that the sooner you know what your costs are going to be, the better decisions you can make about what you're going to build and how you're going to do it. So that's the sort of quantity surveys generally. You're curious, what we do that's different is we use a 3D modelling tool that we've developed, where we create a virtual building. So we virtually build the building as a model first, and then use that model to calculate the cost. So on the screen there's some sort of pictures from our system. So the one at the top left is us calculating out things like the site establishment costs. So we've got some security fencing across the front of the site. We're doing some excavation, and with excavation nowadays you've always got to have sediment control. So we actually create those in the model and then use that to calculate out what the cost of the build is going to be. On the bottom or the middle bottom one is us working out what the demolition costs are going to be for this particular job. So we've got elements in there where we place in the pieces of roof that have been demolished. We say what's happening. So is it just the roof cladding coming off, or the structure, or whatever other parts? And so from that we build up in the case of demolition, it's basically time and rubbish. And so we calculate out what the time and rubbish is going to be. And then what we do is use those 3D elements to work out exactly what all the materials are, what the labour is, what the subcontractors are, what are all the costs related to that build, and we produce it as a set of reports. And the thing behind the 3D component of it is it makes it quite visual. It's visual for us, so we can see if we've put a wall in, we know we've allowed for the wall. Whereas if you're just measuring off a drawing with a ruler and a highlighter, as was traditionally how it's done, it's quite difficult to see exactly what size of wall or what you've put in. So we're able to generate quite a visual report that breaks it down in a way that clients can understand what we're including, what's allowed for, and exactly why and where the costs are for a building project.
I like this quote you've given me here for my kitchen extension and lounge extension and a re-roofing, and take away the health and safety costs, and I could probably afford that 300 grand with the right sort of a loan at the moment. It's fascinating, isn't it? Because I thought people use traditionally square meterage. You watch your average renovation show, maybe out of the UK or something. They always talk about cost per square meter. That's how they estimate the construction costs. So are they right? Are they wrong?
Yeah, traditionally that was the way to do it. Partly because pre-computers, it was a pretty efficient and effective way you could do it. But with using square meter rates and what computers are capable of now, it's really a bit pointless, and it's definitely quite dangerous. Like, square meter rates work if you've built that sort of building of a similar size, similar style quite recently, because inherently they've got lots of assumptions built into them. And if it's similar, then it'll be okay. It'll give you something that looks like a cost. It's quick and it's easy, but it doesn't have to vary much for that square meter rate to suddenly be miles out. And in the case of renovations, because there's so many different variables in the project, using a square meter rate is really dangerous. And so, if that screenshot or the picture that I had up before was, so what I did there was just worked out, I did an exercise where I looked at 200 square meter buildings, and exactly same materials, same number of rooms, same number of windows, same number of doors, and you see there's quite a big difference in the square meter rates between the two of them. And the only difference is the layout, the configuration. So even though everything else is exactly the same, the layout being different changes the square meter rate. So if you were budgeting on that, or if you were a builder quoting on that, you're either way high or way low, and it's going to hurt somebody.
Yeah, because you do your maths quickly. That's 200 bucks per square meter and 100 meters. So suddenly you're talking about 20,000 bucks straight out there, and that's significant. So it's interesting what you said about the renovation game, because although you do some new builds, most of your work is with renovations, and I guess there are so many hidden surprises, hidden costs potentially. So what is your advice for someone thinking about a renovation when it comes to the costing?
Yeah, well, I think the key is getting professional advice early on. So whether it's a QS, whether it's a builder that's got the capability of being able to estimate the costs, because unless you've built recently, you're probably in for a shock as to what something's going to cost. If your experience is 5 or 10 years old, then you're definitely going to be in for a surprise. And we don't like the situations, but we unfortunately come across it too often where a client's got right through to building consent drawings. They've spent all the money on the design, got it consented. We and the builder or a builder put a price against it, and they find it's way more than they can afford. So like I sort of said earlier, it's better to get the bad news early, so that you can make decisions about it, work out what scope fits with your budget, and then work to that. So the sooner you know, the better you are. And just saves you wasting time, money and energy. And it's easier to say, and I guess in some ways it's pretty obvious, but it's probably a somewhat embarrassing example, but I've been through it myself just recently. My family's had a patch of land, a batch at Hokio Beach just out of Levin for since the 70s. We had an old batch on there that we rented out, and it rented really well. And the property manager said, well, why don't you move a house onto it? So I thought, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So we spent a bit of time, found a appropriate house, moved it on. And I thought, well, we're going to have to borrow some money from the bank for this, so I better work out a budget. So I got out a spreadsheet and sort of in my head worked through a list of things that needed to be done, put a thumbsuck number against what I thought the costs were, and that was what we used. And then I got a designer to design it up, and then gave it to my team to do an estimate on it. And we were pretty busy at the time, so it took a while to get around to doing it, but we eventually got around to doing it. And the price came back way higher than what my thumbsuck numbers were. And I looked through it and said, nah, that's not going to be right. We're going to do this cheaper, we're going to do that cheaper. We're just about finished, and guess what? It came out with what my guy said it was going to come out with. So yeah.
Damn it! Don't you hate it when your people are right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
have you told them? Well, they might know now because they're probably watching.
I haven't told.
No,
I've been trying to hold them to my original estimate, but
yeah.
It's easy to get caught out. And with that one, that we end up doing a more extensive renovation on the existing batch, so that was a lot more money. Just the foundations, there was quite a lot of things that when I looked at it, I thought it was going to be this, and when the guys actually calculated it out, it was something quite different. And yeah, my lesson for me, and I think a lesson for everybody is get it done properly early on, and then at least you know what you're working with.
And it's a very good lesson in the fact there's no way you could use the square meterage estimate from a new house build in Levin when you're doing a project like that. Be completely.
I've got one little example there. For a customer we looked at, they wanted to look at what it would cost them to push out their lounge by a meter, so 4 meters wide by a meter, and it cost $40,000. And so that's $10,000 a square meter. And if nobody'd ever say something was going to cost $10,000 a square meter, but when we went through it, it was $1,500 there, $1,500 here. The windows were this, it just all added up, and we basically pulled it to bits to see if we could find anything, and really it is what it is. So yeah, it's
although it's probably worth $40,000 to get a bit of that much extra living space, I guess. But anyway, hey, Nick, thank you very much. Really interesting to chat about that, and we'll catch up with you again, because it'll be I know you guys are going to be pretty busy. I guess a lot of people have been planning while they've been isolated away. But that is Nick Clements there from Your QS. Good to see you. Thank you so much for that. It's really interesting. And as I just mentioned, this is an opportunity for renovators. And here's one in particular: the surge in people adapting their homes to the longer-term workplaces. Okay, it's no secret that a lot of us who've gone up, and some have gone back to work, but a lot of people are anticipating long-term changes in their work practices, not just for the next few weeks or months, but for maybe years or forever. And so although some are back in the office, others are still working from home, some are doing a bit of a mix of the two. I wonder how many, though, are actually thinking about installing a more permanent work area in their homes. And so I went on to see what some of the big gun companies were thinking about this, whether they're thinking about bringing everyone back to the office, or whether they're thinking about installing some sort of work from home policy for the long term, the Googles, the Amazons as such. Particularly as in the US, this pandemic situation is far from where we've got to in New Zealand. Well, Facebook they've said as of last week that they would begin to allow most of their employees to request a permanent change in their jobs to let them work remotely for most of their employees. They're going to now make most of their US job openings eligible for remote hires, and they're going to begin taking applications for permanent remote work amongst its workforce later this year. So this is the long term for Facebook. Shopify, another massive company from the US, they're going to keep the offices closed until way into next year, so they can then rework them with this as a future reality. And after that, they're looking at permanently working remotely. They say office centricity is over for them. Now, these are quite agile companies, but Twitter, employees are going to continue to work from home as long as they see fit. That's what they said. Amazon, they're working remotely just until October 2020. Google till January 21. PayPal till October 2020. Salesforce, Zillow, January 2021. These are massive US tech companies. Here in New Zealand, I can only speak from experience, and that is the last place I worked, which was the National Business Review. Well, their offices were in central Auckland, and so their boss, when this all started, being in the media industry as well, things were pretty hard. He thought, well, either I can reduce everyone's pay, or I can bin the offices. And so he hasn't renewed the lease. And as a result, he's been able to have his entire workforce work from home on their full pay throughout the isolation. And now they're not going to bother going back into the office because it's working so well for them. That's it. Offices closed permanently. All staff work from home. That is the new norm at MBR. So a changing landscape in the commercial property world, with not only those companies who have to reduce their workers, those who've got half or empty offices as well. And the businesses, of course, who will choose to continue to work from home, possibly forever. So I wonder how many people have now had enough of plugging into the laptop of the 7-year-old daughter's bedroom to get the best Wi-Fi and are now looking to set up their own longer-term work from home options. My recommendation is get a quantity surveyor to tell you what it's going to cost before you start building yourself an outdoor office. Maybe a topic for another day here on the Renovation and Outdoor Living Show. We'll see you Friday. Bye-bye.